surely find something else for her to do, but she didn't do anything around here. Good morning, folks. Good to be with you. Laura mentioned the weather. It's absolutely been beautiful the last few days. And they are talking about rain, I guess, tonight or whatever, next couple of days, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. With all my suggestions and whining and crying and all of that, I still ain't got no money. And I thought, sure, that somebody would feel sorry for me, but no, just so I guess I'm going to have to go out maybe this afternoon myself and see if I can find some. John 15, 1 through 17. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You've already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me, and I in them, bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers, and such branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you may bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from the Father. You did not choose me, I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask of in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. I forgot to mention a moment ago that Linda was telling me that Barb Blackader passed away. I'm not sure when, last day or two, I guess. I didn't know that she was back home, but it did indicate that she wasn't home, so I keep her and her family in your prayers. They will need it, as we all understand what that's all about. A newspaper reporter went to interview a successful entrepreneur. He asked him, how did you do that? How did you make all this money? Well, I'm glad you asked, the entrepreneur replied. Actually, it's a rather wonderful story. You see, when my wife and I married, we started out with a roof over our heads, some food in our pantry, and 5 cents between us. I took that nickel, went down to the grocery store, bought an apple and shined it up, then I sold it for 10 cents. What'd you do then, the reporter asked. Well, he said, then I bought 2 more apples, shined them up, and sold them for 20 cents. The reporter thought, this would be a great human interest story. Then what, the reporter asked excitedly. He said, well, then my father-in-law died and left me $20 million. That man prospered not because of his own ingenuity, but because he was connected. Connected. Think about that word for a moment. What does it mean to be connected? Well, it means power, doesn't it? When we hear someone say, I have connection, what they are really saying is that I have access to power and wealth. I can get it done. I'm connected. There's a human story about another successful businessman who was invited to deliver the commencement address at a school. He elected to speak on the subject, how to succeed. As he entered the door leading the auditorium stage, he noticed the word push printed on the bold letters on the outside of the door. He thought, well, that'd be a good theme for his speech, push. Then when he hit the high point of his speech, he said, I can sum up my message in one word, and he pointed to the door. The students started laughing. Puzzled, the speaker looked at the door, and printed on the inside of the door was not the word push, but pull. That's how many people succeed, not because of their push, but because of their pull. Because they're connected to someone who is powerful. How often we've heard people say, it's not what you know, but who you know And there's a lot of truth to that, folks. To be connected also means a presence. We have a presence in our lives. We're not alone. We have someone to share our life with, someone who's there for us. Because in my opinion, there's nothing sadder than the person who has nobody. I remember years ago, I'll never forget it. It was a long time ago. When I was first in the ministry, I had 5 small churches, country churches at that time, and was going to school and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the funeral director called me one day and he said, we have a county funeral. Well, you know, this is paid for by the county. And, you know, this individual was living in one of the homes out there. And anyway, it was just as bottom of the line as you could possibly get. You know, I mean, it was a wooden casket, and it was just. And so I said, I'd be glad to help. And so we went there, and there was a visitation before. And I got there when the visitation started, and nobody. So then it come time for us to go to the cemetery, and the funeral director, myself, and his wife, and another person or two that worked there, we all got the casket in the hearse. We went to the cemetery. We got to the cemetery, there was sure to be some folks there. There wasn't anyone. No one. The funeral director, myself, the grave digger, and a guy that was responsible for the cemetery buried this man. Just think of that. I mean, to be that isolated and with nobody. Or consider the legend Unabomber. Remember that Unabomber, the intelligent man who reportedly committed bizarre and cruel acts a few years ago? Part of his problem, in my opinion, was he cut himself off from his family, his colleagues, and his friends. Remember seeing on television where he lived? A little bitty shack out in the boondocks. There's something about isolation that does something to the human spirit. Whether that isolation is chosen or whether it is caused by circumstances beyond our control, it just does something to it. And you know, there's one thing that we've learned in this pandemic that we've been experiencing is it really affects us when we can't really be together and not have that contact. Brenda Reed said it, I don't know, a couple months ago at one of our station meetings. He said, when this is all over with, we want to have a big party. And when we get together, we're going to have a big group hug because we just need to be together and shake hands. I can't understand it. It almost kills me not to be shaking hands. I put my hands in my pockets to keep them happy. But there's something about our need for one another, and we've discovered that, I think, in a very painful way through this pandemic. Many of you have had the experience of being cut off from someone you love by death or divorce. We've all been there, haven't we? There's no more devastating experience in life. The loneliness and sense of isolation can be absolutely overwhelming. Sometimes having your children grow up and leave home. I understand there's a luncheon group of older mothers in New York. They call themselves, I want to quote this, "It wouldn't hurt you to call me once in a while club." Paul's here tells the story of a lonely lady who we once knew who turned on her radio every night just to hear her announcer with a friendly voice say, she thinking it to her, "We bid you a very good evening." She felt the announcer was the only person who really cared about her. Isolation, loneliness. It's horrible. There's a program at the University of Florida in which veterinary students staff a hotline to help grieving pet owners cope with the death of their pets. The students receive specialized training to learn how to counsel and assist callers experiencing painful emotions with the loss of a pet. There's tremendous need for such a service, says the faculty member Thomas Lane, who spearheaded the project. Growing numbers of singles and elderly people rely on pets for companionship, feeling the death of a pet as strongly as that of a family member or a friend. And I understand that. We buried Josie. But for those of you who've been in our home, we have 2 little dogs, the bigger one of the 2 little ones. We buried them yesterday. It's painful. I mean, you think back on all the memories. And for those of you who have pets, you know what I'm talking about. You don't think people can grieve over the loss of a pet, you know. know what it feels like to have a pet. Isolation is a terrible thing. It really is. Tim Kimball, in his book, oh, that's a great title, Little House on the Freeway, tells about his mother who died of cancer. From the time the doctors discovered it to the time it took her life was only 5 months. Her decline was swift, unstoppable. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy had no effect on it at all. Difficult for the family to watch her as she died. Tim and his younger brother flew 2,000 miles to see her 3 times in the 5 months that she was sick. During the last month, Tim called every morning to see how she made it through the night, and every night to see how she made it through the day. Tim's father stayed with his beloved wife every day, all day. Tim's 3 other brothers and sisters all lived in the area, and they stopped by almost daily to be with her. Shortly before Tim's mom died, a wealthy, influential member of that small community was admitted to the intensive care unit for observation. On the 3rd night of his stay in the hospital, he had a discussion with the nurse who was preparing him to go to sleep for the night. Tim called the unit shortly after she finished working with this wealthy gentleman. She couldn't help but relate their conversation to Tim. Now, this young nurse was a committed Christian. She knew of Tim's family's love for Christ and his mother's quiet but compelling testimony and her faith. She told him that the man she talked with was one of the most powerful men in the community. He wielded great influence even at the hospital. Yet he had lain in that hospital room for 3 days without a single visitor. He had a wife, he had children, but they never came by. As she was giving him his medicine, he inquired of the patient in the private room. The nurse said, "Oh, that's Mrs. Kimball. You want to know about Tim's father and his brothers and sisters." She told him all about them and mentioned that there were 2 sons out of town and had flown back to see her several times and called daily to check on her status. He asked about Tim's mom's condition. "Mrs. Kimball will die any day," the nurse told him. "If she lives a week, we'll all be surprised." At this point, this man of influence dropped his head back on his pillow and got quiet. Just before she walked away, he looked up at her with tears in his eyes and said, "You know what? I would gladly trade places, Mrs. Kimball, and die a week from now, if for that week I could have a spouse and children who cared enough about me not to make me die alone." Now, if you think that's unusual, I want to assure you folks, it's not. As I have traveled around Virginia, it always amazes me. Of course, I haven't done it for some time now, but it's amazing to me the number of people who are alone. Alone. No family. No friends. Folks, we all have a need to be connected. We need to know that there are people who care about us. We need to know that we are not alone. We're not alone. And of course, this is where our faith comes into play. Our faith tells us that we are not alone. We're never alone, no matter how isolated our situation may seem. We're never alone. Columnist Sheila Graham had a compelling interview with Ruby Bridges Hall some time back. I don't know if that rings a bell with any of you. Maybe the name doesn't ring a bell, but I think you'll remember the story at least. What she went through as a child. Ruby looked like a typical first grader, with a big bow in her hair and a lunchbox in her hand. She climbed the steps of William France Elementary School for the first day of school. But little else was typical about that day in November 1960. Though she wasn't aware of it, Ruby had been chosen to be the first African-American child to integrate this particular New Orleans grade school. Now you remember the story. Every day on her way to school, escorted by armed federal marshals, she braved angry whites shouting at her as she entered an empty classroom. White parents had already moved their children to other schools. Ruby did not realize until later when her little boy told her why he couldn't play with her. She was the reason for all the commotion, she discovered. In her interview, Sheila Graham noted that even in this stressful situation of having mobs scream at her, little Ruby prayed every day. And she prayed before school, after school, and she prayed for those who were abusing her as she walked to school. Ruby Bridges explained it this way. One thing my mother always said to me when I couldn't be with me, if I was ever afraid, I should say my prayers. Even at night, if I would wake up from a nightmare and want to get up and go to her room, she would immediately ask me, did you say your prayers? That's where that came from. And it always just stuck with me somehow. Ruby's mother wanted her to know that no matter the situation, she was never alone. She was connected. To be connected is to have power. It's to have an eternal presence in your life. It's to know that someone cares about you and for you. And folks, that's the good news for the day. We can be connected to one who can give us the power, who can give us the presence, one who can help us live productive, powerful lives. Jesus put it this way. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you will, and it will be done for you. I'm going to have a carry-out now on this one. Vineyard owners tell us that the strongest point of any vine is the place where the vine and the branch join together. Now, if you pull on a branch that goes into a tree, it will always break at the trunk of the tree, because that's the weakest place. That should not surprise us. Christ says to us, I have the strength to provide all your needs. I have the strength to hold you in the time of testing. I will be there for you. Where you're joined to the vine is your strongest, most powerful place to be. Let us pray. Father, help us to be connected to you. Then all things are possible. We thank you for that knowledge and pray that you'll help us always to turn to you in our time of need, knowing that as we do so, you will be there. And we thank you.